Pauline, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Tell me, how are your grandchildren doing?
We're back.
Welcome to Michael Robert Live. Hello, everyone. I hope your week started off well this week. We're very excited to have Pauline on the show tonight. She has recently moved back from Florida.
Right.
Not so. Are you the one that's brought the good winter to us this year?
Absolutely. You believe that, you believe anything.
Yeah, exactly. So, tell me, was it verbal or the physical that was more hurtful to you? Have you ever thought about it?
Well, there were both, but to say which one was more difficult.
Or how you felt about either or both?
The physical, once it was over, eh, not that you forgot it, you remembered it, but I think mentally, because that hung on longer.
Ah.
Because I would always say, why does he do that to me? He's my dad. He's supposed to love me. Yet he wasn't saying he loved me. Only once I got older, in my teens, a couple of times he would come like in my room and say he was sorry.
Oh,
And I
how did
guess
that feel?
I don't know if he expected me to say, "Oh, it's all right, Dad," but I would just go, shake my head, and like, "Yeah, okay," till the next time.
Were there next times after he said
Yeah.
he was? Oh, there was. Oh,
And I mean, my mother had two sisters and a brother. They were grown and married, had children of their own, and I'm sure they knew what was going on in that household.
your household.
Hmm. Now, I have 5 sisters.
Oh my goodness.
I'm the second.
Did he treat you all the same?
The oldest one, she never got anywhere close to what I did or my sister after myself, because she was Mom's favorite, and she was sick with asthma a lot.
Oh,
And at the age of 6, she almost died with ruptured appendix. So she was the delicate one,
oh my goodness. You had that dynamic going on also in your family.
But you grow up and you say, well, he's doing it, but Mom's not defending me. Mom's not saying,
Right,
telling him, stop it, don't,
right.
She didn't intervene. She came from the old school. Her husband ruled the roost. And if he told her to jump, she jumped.
Was he ever physical with her?
No.
Hmm.
A couple of times he'd yell and holler, but she'd back off and he wouldn't hit her. But she was not there to protect us when she should have.
Did you feel that she loved you less because she wouldn't protect you? Like, how did you deal with that? And when were you able to talk about this? How did you survive? Did you discuss it?
No, we never discussed it with my mother. The 4 oldest girls were the ones that saw everything, the abuse and everything. The 2 younger ones, they saw a different side of Dad. They never saw that side of him. He never touched them.
But he was still doing it when they were there.
When they were young, yes.
Hmm.
But he came from the old school and didn't believe in educating you because you're just going to get married and have kids, because that's all we were supposed to expect it of.
How old were you when you got married?
18.
You wanted out, I'm sure.
Yes, definitely. But we were brought up very strict Catholic.
Did you go to Catholic school?
Oh, yes. And matter of fact, there was a local priest that used to come to dinner quite often, at least 2 Sundays a month. He was at the house for
Right.
dinner on Sunday. And
Yeah, we always had priests and nuns at our house, but I really liked it, actually.
yeah, but it was kind of difficult because as you grew older, you could never say you wanted to marry a man like Dad,
Right,
because that was the last thing you wanted,
right.
you know. And
Did you?
I'm on husband number 5, and I've been abused by everyone except for this one.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
This one here,
Not the previous 4.
this one here, we've been married 13 years, and we were together 3 years before that. And he has never put a hand on me.
So tell me what changed in you to be able to have a relationship now that doesn't include that.
Well, both my parents are deceased now. And I was by my father's side when he died. And,
What was going on in your head and your heart?
well, I think a lot of the upbringing and being Catholic and having it said, honor thy mother and thy father, had a lot to do with it, because if someone commits a sin against you, doesn't mean you have to do one against them. And it was just, I think, a whole guilt trip that I had riding on my shoulders. I just wanted to be the good wife, the good mother, the good daughter, the goody two-shoes, which I've been accused of more than once. He, before he died, he had an oxygen mask on, and he kept trying to take it off, and he was taking my hand and bringing it up to his mouth, like he was trying to kiss my hand, and the way he was looking at me, I think it was his way of saying he was sorry. And I just whispered in his ear, "It's okay, Dad." And then probably within 20 minutes, he passed. And I've never regretted it, because it's not to forgive is worse for you than it is for them.
Exactly.
You just carry that baggage with you.
You set yourself free in that moment.
Yes. So you can forgive, but doesn't mean you forget.
Have you ever felt a moment of freedom from that? Can you remember that moment?
Yes. I've had a couple of times with where I walked out of a marriage and said, I deserve better than this, and I'm not going to take any more. And it takes more to walk than it does to stick around and put up with it.
Absolutely.
I mean, sticking by your man, as they say, doesn't mean you have to put up with that kind of abuse. 2 of my marriages, he was 20 years older than me. My stepson was 2.5 years younger than me. And he was a hemophiliac, and he did not want Dad to marry. And he made it very difficult for me. And another husband that was 19 years older than me. He had 3 grown sons, and none of them would speak to him. None of them wanted anything to do with him.
Was their mother alive?
Yes, she left and filed for divorce. and he was in the military, and it was the military police that came and took him out. And he was very hostile, apparently, because when I did talk to his youngest son, I asked him how his father was when he was growing up. And he turned away from me. And then when he turned around and looked at me, he just said he was brutal. And the word brutal, you know, kids might say, oh, my father's tough, you know, he's hard, or he slaps me, or he might, but to say your father's brutal.
Oh.
I was only right after that, wasn't long after that, because he had put his hands on me the third time, and I said, 3 times you're out. Marriage only lasted 5 years. He was going to treat me like I was in the Marine Corps. Nope. I was at that point in my life, I was old enough to say, no, I won't take that. I won't.
So, first of all, I'm amazed at the person that you are to have overcome whatever it was that you were attracted to men like your dad, which is kind of natural and normal.
Well, they don't really show the true colors until you're after you're married.
Right.
But
and that you had the courage to keep getting married.
I've always said, I think even as a teenager, I always wanted the white picket fence. I wanted to be June Cleaver.
Julius, you know who that is?
Yeah.
No.
That's Beaver's mother.
Leave it to Beaver.
Leave it to Beaver. It was the, like Pauline saying, it was the idyllic white picket fence. They even washed dishes together.
Yeah.
Beaver and Wally were the 2 sons.
Nice
those,
naming. Good
those
job.
names, great names.
Who names their kids?
who names their kids Beaver and Wally? But anyway, you didn't even think about that. When you watched that show, you thought, wow, look at this. I mean, they were selling it really hard that this is what a family needs to be.
Oh, you know, I wanted to be stay-at-home mom that had fresh-baked cookies when the kids came home, have their cookies and milk. And how was your day? You know, and everything.
In your chiffon dress.
Oh, yeah.
She used to dust.
That's
I used to think that was so funny. Like all dressed up. She would be dusting. And I would think grandma wasn't in a chiffon dress.
No.
Dusting.
But that's not the way I was brought up. I didn't see that. But, you know, when you'd see it on TV, you'd say, oh, my mom never made me cookies. You know, that wasn't the way I was brought up. I mean, I helped raise my younger siblings.
Right.
And back then, there was no such thing as Pampers. We had cloth diapers,
right.
You know, and you were dunking diapers in the toilet and then putting them into a bucket and, you know, the wringer, washing machine and everything. And I loved taking care of my younger siblings. I loved it. That's what I really wanted, that ideal life where my children would have a great life and I would be taking them to softball practice and, you know, whatever, and dance recitals. And my children did have more of it than I ever did, that's for sure. I mean, my oldest one did do her dance recitals and everything else, and there was the soccer and things like that with my boys, which they were like the things that I wanted when I was growing up that I never got. But my children did get more than I did, and I would never have stood by my husband if he put a hand on my children.
Right.
Never. my children were never abused. There's a fine line between overbearing and, being disciplined. There's, you can discipline without physically putting a hand on a child,
Yes.
you know. I had this thing about stamping my foot and putting my hands on my hip and said, I said. And my daughter copied me one day. She stomped her foot and said, I said. And it was funny because then later on, when she had my granddaughter, she called me up. She was living in Clearwater and I was in Rhode Island. She calls me up from Florida and says, Mom, you're not going to believe this. And I said, what? She goes, Lily just stomped her foot, had her hands on her hips and said, I said. And I said, well.
There you go.
I wonder
Here
where she
we
got
go.
that idea from.
Yeah, so it was funny. And I did it. And then I realized what I was doing when I'd get upset. I said, with my hands on my hips.
So there are so many people that I've met in my life who had childhood experiences.
Mhm.
And I myself have had those experiences where I'm thinking, oh my God, I sound like my mother. Or, oh geez, my dad used to say that. And here these words are coming out of my mouth.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, oh, I can't be doing this. But those are like funny things, like you're saying.
Mhm.
But there are so many people who suffer in their childhood and they say to themselves, I'll never do that to my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And they end up doing the exact same thing to their own kids.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, marrying Bob, what changed? You said your parents passed.
Mm-hmm.
Is that when something you felt differently about yourself inside? So back up 1 second. I believe the person we attract into our lives is a projection of how we feel about ourselves. So I'm wondering, were you consciously aware of a different feeling towards yourself so Bob would come into your life, not like your other 4 husbands? Or it was an unconscious thing?
I think after 4 divorces, I just said to myself, I don't know, maybe I'm finished with this. I mean, I can take care of myself. Why do I attract this type, But one of the girls I worked with, we were very good friends, and the guy she was dating, I had known for quite some time, and he wanted to introduce me to his friend. And I said, I'm not ready. So one day he came up to the desk where I was working and had Bob with him, and he introduced me to Bob. So he said, how would you like to come with me, on a bike ride? He says, I got a motorcycle. He says, we can go for a little bike ride, go for a burger or something or other. And a friend was there with her boyfriend, and they said, yeah, we'll all go, So I said, yeah, okay. Sounded like a good time, And
You got on the back of the bike?
yeah.
Was that the first time you were on a motorcycle?
No, I'd been on bikes before.
Oh, you had. Okay.
But I've always liked them. And
Well, there you go. Was that a little tip for you that Bob rode a motorcycle? Bob had a motorcycle?
a little bit. I said to myself, oh, he's kind of cute, But he was a laid back, easygoing kind of guy,
Right.
you know, and he wasn't very in your face all the time,
Right.
you know, like I'm the greatest, and he wasn't boastful, so that I liked. And
That's what my wife liked about me too.
yeah.
I'm not so sure she would agree. Is mommy making a comment?
No, not yet, but
Not
I'm sure.
yet.
I'm
sure
sure
she
it'll
will.
come in very soon.
You may be getting yourself in deep water.
To completely turn the conversations on its head, I want to ask you this question. Can you remember the first time you walked into a hospice?
I worked with hospice with here in Rhode Island, and several of the patients that I was seeing, they were hospice. But back then, we didn't get on the readout. It didn't say, you know, completely everything having to do with their background. Then it got to the point where if you weren't hospice trained, actually Medicare didn't have to cover the price, the tab. So I went for training at the hospice, and there's an author, Elizabeth Ross, Keebler-Ross. She does the books on death and dying.
Yes.
They're phenomenal.
Phenomenal book.
Everyone should read them. The bargaining stages and the different stages that a person goes through when they're diagnosed, the anger, then they end up with the acceptance. But there's so much to it. People who have gotten a diagnosis, who have a good religious background, they're strong in their faith, they have a good family background. They have their loved ones around, be it siblings, family, like their children, their husband or wife. It just and their whole attitude. People who are generally positive. You know, the doctor could turn around and say they only have 3 months, and yet I've seen these people live 9, 10, 12 months. They have a daughter that's getting married, a son graduating from college, whatever it be. They have something they really want to see or live for. And it's their state of mind. I swear it just keeps them going.
What made you want to go into hospice?
I've always said that, you know, not everyone's cut out for the nursing. Not everyone's cut out to be a teacher or whatever. But to be able to take care of someone and make them comfortable, and where they actually are anxious to see you every day, that makes me feel good. I'm needed and I'm wanted, and I feel I'm doing something good.
Does that make you feel more worthy to yourself?
I believe so. Yeah.
And is that enough? Does that fill you up, helping these people?
It really gave me a good feeling that I'd found my calling. You know, it was tough. Sometimes I'd go a good year and a half without a vacation. And people, you'd tell someone, well, I'm thinking of going on vacation. They'd say, well, you can't get, Mama might die before, you know, she looks forward to seeing you or whatever. And it's like, okay. So you put it off. But to know that, like I said, to be able to go home at night and say, I gave 100%, that person is a perfect condition and he's happy, he's comfortable, whatever. I did everything I could. Just made me feel good.
Can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Can you remember the first time you or a particular patient that sticks out to you when they passed?
I had several that, when they tell you they're only going to be about 3 months and they last like 9, 10 months, you get very attached because you're seeing them 5, sometimes 7 days a week. This person might even, say, "You're my girl. Where's my girl?" When they pass, it's hard. It's very hard. I used to get a lot of live plants after a person would pass. The family would send me a live plant. I had a whole table, and here you go, Albert. Here you go, Francis. Okay. If they were all named after the person's family that gave it to me, and they knew, a lot of people knew that I loved birdhouses. I love birds, and I used to get gifts of birdhouses. I got some very unique birdhouses given to me. My whole backyard in Cumberland had birdhouses everywhere. But I got very close to families where I would actually stop by and visit.
I remember you mentioned one person speaking to the foot of his bed.
I had a gentleman. He was a very frail young gentleman. He had a couple of daughters, and he drove heavy equipment. And he started having a lot of pain, discomfort in his back, and he thought it was, because he's driving this heavy equipment. He ended up with, it was cancer. And he was an avid fisherman, loved his fishing. And his wife and I became pretty good friends. He just was a real sweet guy, and he was in bed one day, and I come by. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I stopped in to see him, and his vital signs were not good. And so I called the office, and I said, "Oh, it's going to be this afternoon," So they sent one of the charge nurses down, and I said I was going to leave for maybe an hour. I had to see another patient, but I'd be back for sure. And when I came back, the sister-in-law, I said, "How's he doing?" The sister-in-law looked at me and she went, I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "He sat up in bed on his own and he was talking to his mother." I said, "Yeah." She said, "He's staring at the foot of the bed talking." I said, "Yeah." And she says, "She's been dead like 40 years. So I said, "Yeah, I've heard of it before and I've seen it before, yeah." She looked at me like I had 3 heads. It hadn't been the first time. I'd seen a patient right towards the end of death just open his eyes or her eyes and just talking to someone. And then a smile comes across their face, and it isn't long afterwards they pass. And with this person here, I asked him, I said, "Who'd you talk to?" And he said, "Mama." I said, "Oh, yeah?" He goes, "She came with my sister. They'd come to take me." And I said, "Well, you're ready, And I said, "Are you ready?" He said, so I said, "You know what? I'm going to send your wife in. You need to say goodbye. Tell her it's okay. Okay?" And he shook his head, and I told his wife, "Go lay on the side of him in bed." And I said, "Tell him it's okay to go." She did. And within 10 minutes, he passed. She was laying by his side in the bed. She had told him that it was all right, that she and the 2 girls would be fine, and that she, when it was her time, she'd meet him. But I'd seen it a couple of other times. And that's why when you see those sort of things, there's more to life.
So did you question the existence of God?
No,
You always, from the beginning,
I was brought up Catholic, and I really firmly
you
believe
felt it.
there was more there.
And having experienced the number of people just before they go, having similar experiences to the fishermen,
Hmm.
does that reinforce your belief?
Yes, yes.
Dad, I don't know if you know this about me, but I like to live with the idea that it could all go at any minute. And maybe as a 16-year-old, it's weird to say, but there's definitely been a picture in my head of what it would look like when I go.
Really?
A lot of people, I think, who really think deep about how am I going to go? What would be with
Well, I know what
myself,
I want when I go.
the angels coming and take you, huh?
Don't tell me because I'll be long gone. But anyway, tell me what that picture looks like.
I guess what anyone would want. All your family in a room across from you, and to go peacefully and calmly, and in a perfect world, maybe the ocean out the window.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the ideal as an old person. And I'd still like to be lucid to the very end and then go.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the biggest thing. Have you ever thought about something like this after seeing so
I-
many people go?
I've seen times where people who, towards the end, they're not as lucid as because we're giving them pain meds and stuff, and yet when they're talking to a loved one, they're not mumbling. You understand every word. It's very clear.
Talking to a loved one that's not there.
It's not there. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's really interesting that you would say that because I've never had that thought. What have you thought about how you want to go? I mean, I've always said I don't want to suffer. And I want it to just be fast.
Right.
No, but I like to plan out everything, so you
Yes,
may
I
as well
know. I
you may as well
know,
plan it to
Julius.
the very end.
I know.
Mm.
But the details,
Well, I have COPD and asthma, and I have certain times a year worse than others, but not. I've actually gone on a 2-week bus trip, and we ended up in Colorado and everything else. And oh my God, it wasn't easy to breathe. But for me, I often think that I'll probably go when my lungs decide that they've had it. So now I've never been a real smoker, but yet my illness with my lungs is from a marriage of 10 years where he lit one up with the butt of a lit when he was putting out. He was constant, was over 3.5 packs a day. Like it's one right after the other. He had the ashtray on the table while he was eating dinner.
oh my goodness.
But that's what a lot of my respiratory problems are from. But so that's the way I assume I will go. But I've watched many people suffer, but now with a lot of the medications they give, they try to keep up on it. So you don't have that span between doses. But
So the suffering's minimized
it's minimized.
physically. So I just to get back, I'm curious to know when you've had those thoughts of how you want to go. What's the timing? What was it around? What made you even think about that?
Well, I always know in my head that it's all going to go by in the blink of an eye, and that when that moment comes, it'll just come. To answer your question more directly, when I've thought about it, there isn't a whoa, good speaking. There isn't a specific moment that I can think of where that came to mind. But I know that happy people live very short lives because looking back, it all goes by in a minute.
Hmm.
What I mean by that is only
Metaphorically. You're speaking
metaphorically. Yeah.
metaphorically.
Well,
Well, that's true.
if you're miserable and grumpy, every second feels like a decade. So
Mm.
I'd rather live a short and happy life. By metaphorically.
That is so true to me. And I'm constantly saying, I've lost all ability to quantify time.
Mm.
We've been back in Rhode Island for 5 years.
Doesn't feel like it.
In a way, it feels like we've been here a week. So of course I always go to I'm getting old. Time is speeding up.
Well, it does, but
Well, I'll
How do
tell
you
you,
know?
when you've got grandchildren that are young, and he's going to have his birthday, and he's going to be 7. So okay, oh wow, 7 candles, this and that. So then he says, "Nana, how old are you?" And I said, 70. He's looking at me, and he's learning to count to 100 in school. So I took a piece of paper and a crayon, and I made a big circle. And I had him on my lap, and I said, okay, we're going to count now. And I said, every time I say the number, you're going to make a little line, okay? So I said 1, and we go all the way up, and boy, that circle's getting pretty darn full. So we get to 70. And he just turns around and does one of these, looks at me, goes, Nana, you're old. And I said, yeah, but I'm still here. I can still go for walks. See, Nana can still do all that stuff. Don't I make you brownies? I make you breakfast and stuff. Yeah. So the child knows I have lung problems. And he turns around. I said, well, if I got all those candles, are you going to help me blow them out? And he looks at me, and with a straight face, God almighty, he says, Nana, I got a lot of friends. We'll help you. Isn't that the cutest? Oh,
my.
Nana, I got a lot of friends. We'll help you. So I says, well, I'll need the help. Okay. Well, now Nana's going to be 72. But I'll never forget that.
need another 2 friends.
Yeah, a couple more.
My nephews were always trying to get my mother's age out of her. And they would concoct the most unbelievable schemes to try and trick her to get this is an going thing until they were, I don't know, 9 or 10 years old, but it was like your grandson. It was the cutest, funniest thing.
Yep.
But what I find really interesting was, what were they thinking in their head? Like, why was it? It was always the grandmother. It wasn't the grandfather. And I wonder what they were thinking, or what the motivation. Were they thinking she's not going to be around? Like,
Well, a couple of times when I got sick, a matter of fact, the last time I was hospitalized, I told my daughter, don't tell the boys.
right.
They'll be home. They don't need to know, because I'd gotten sick one time. Their father's a paramedic. Their mother's a nurse. So Dad's going to hook me up with an IV because Nana's dehydrated. And he started to cry.
Yeah.
Nana's going to die.
Right.
And I said, no, it's going to take a hell of a lot more than that. I'm not ready to go yet. No, baby, I'm going to be fine, But well, there's so many things in life that can bring you joy. You just have to open your eyes and look for it. Instead of being negative, people need to learn to be a little more positive.
And just so that people know where the person that's saying that, how are your grandchildren doing after what happened to your daughter?
They're all in their 20s.
Now.
Yeah.
To one of your daughters. We should clarify their
my
two
oldest
daughters.
daughter passed away at 40 from a suicide. And I was living in Florida. She was living in Rhode Island. And I would try to text her and call, and she wouldn't answer. I would send cards in the mail. And she had gotten involved with a religious group. And if you're not in their group, then they shun you. And so she was about 9 months. And it was a real shock to get the phone call that she had taken her own life.
Was she
On the other line.
Yeah, who called you?
My younger daughter called me that her sister had committed suicide.
And was she married at the time?
She was divorced.
Oh, she was divorced.
Yeah, she had the 3 children. The 2 boys were autistic. And she really had her hands full. And she had some problems with she was depressed, severely depressed. And some of the medications she was on was more than just a little depression. I think she was bipolar. And
her whole life, or is that something that developed? Or
she was very moody as a teenager, extremely moody.
more than the norm?
More, yeah. Yeah.
So what went through your head when that call came?
Yeah, what was...
It was a hell of a shock, I'll tell you. It was like, no, you just can't be. No, somebody else, they've mistaken who this is, it's like it's got to be somebody else's kid, not mine. And they said, no, Ma, they identified her from a tattoo that she had. So, it was just very difficult because I was living in Florida. She was up here. And because of her being divorced, I was next of kin. So I had to come up, and her body was in Providence in the Department of Health there.
The morgue?
The morgue. And they were going to do an autopsy on her. They said whenever there's something like that, they have to do the autopsy. Her body was found in Washington State Park, right on the Connecticut line. And they said there was a gunshot wound. So anyway, I had to wait and wait for them to do the autopsy, for the body to be released to the undertaker, to have her cremated. And it was like everything was made more difficult. When I went to the town of Chepachet, because she died in that county, I was walking out. I'd gotten the paperwork. And as I'm walking out, I said to my younger daughter, I said, something's wrong with this. And she says, what do you mean? I said, the dates are wrong. They had her dates wrong. It made it look like she was 10 years old instead of 40. They really made a big mistake. Well, so I called the undertaker, and she goes, oh, that can't be touched. She says, they can't rectify that. That has to go back to Providence to be taken care of. So I had to go to Providence, and they had to get someone in, and they had to change it, but put above it that it was had been changed somehow. And it was just ridiculous. And then I wanted an autopsy report, and it took me 9 months to get it. Every time I'd call, I'd say, I just want an autopsy report. And they told me that that's not normal. They don't normally do that, give that out, so on. So, and I said, I'm her mother. I have a right to know what she died from. And I said, no one seems to be able to tell me.
Was it the gunshot wound?
There were two gunshot wounds.
So why did they deem it a suicide?
because it looks like she had parked her car and then walked into the woods quite some way. And where the car was, she was very secluded, and her body, she was found, forgot how many yards away.
Was the gun there?
Apparently, yes. And her body had started to decompose.
Right.
And they said that one gunshot went through the chest, through the lung, never touched the heart. And then the other one went through underneath the chin, through the mouth cavity, through the nasal cavity, and out. So it never even went into her brain. So she suffered quite a bit. But I never got the medical examiner to even talk to me or return a phone call. And even the state police. I called and asked to speak to the detective that was in charge of her. Never got a phone call back. I'll tell you, the state of
Sound
Rhode
like
Island
very
really.
strange circumstances.
Yes. Yes.
So
To,
it's
to put
bad
it, to
enough.
put it lightly, we have some comments that put it more succinctly, but that sounds like some very strange circumstances.
Hmm.
So one of the most unthinkable thing happens to you. You lose a child, and then you have all that aggravation,
You want answers and you can't get it.
which I'm sure the biggest question at the time was, why did she do it? How did you feel?
Totally confused. And I think that when you can't connect the dots, it makes it worse because it seems like you're not getting the answers. Even if it's an answer that you don't like, at least if it's, if they can say, well, this, because of the blood, because of this or that, you know. But I didn't get any. They couldn't do anything to give me any closure whatsoever because they wouldn't even respond.
So tell us about your friend who couldn't give you any closure at the time either, and what she
Well, when I went back to Florida and I went back to work, and there was a girl I worked with. We were pretty friendly, and I was having a tough day, and she just said, "Oh, get over it." She says, there's nothing you can do about it, so. And it just caught me off guard, the way she said it.
Was it hurtful?
Yeah, it was hurtful. Yeah, it really hurt. That was the way she said it. Oh, get over it. Like my dog died or something. So, about maybe 5 months later, I come into work and I ask, where is she? I said, oh, you didn't hear? She flew up to Massachusetts. They found her daughter dead. I said, really? I said, oh my God. So when she came back from, the funeral up in Massachusetts, she flew back to Florida. I went up to her and I said, I'm really sorry about your loss. I know where you're coming from. And I just gave her a hug. And I said, if you want to talk, we'll talk. Okay? And she just looked at me. And it wasn't long afterwards. We were talking, and she said that she wanted to apologize for the way she spoke to me when I came back to work after my daughter died. And I said, well, it's over with. She said, I didn't know what it was like until I lost my own. So she says, I'm walking in your shoes now. And now we're good friends. We'll text each other once in a while, Christmas or whatever. She always remembers my birthday. But it's strange, you know. You don't realize what you say to someone and how you say it, you can really hurt somebody.
So your message.
My message is no matter how loved one passes, whether it be suicide, a car accident, a murder, whatever, it's still someone's loved one. Someone loved that person, and someone's grieving. Have a little heart in the way you speak to people. And you don't tell a woman who's lost a child, oh, I know what you're going through. No, you don't. If you haven't lost a child, you don't. You could lose your mother, you can lose your father, but don't lose a child. It's totally different. Someone that you brought into this world is now gone. Children are not supposed to outlive, parents are not supposed to outlive their children.
So your favorite, one of your favorite authors, we're going to have Julius read the little poem.
Which one? The one on the first bookmark on page
Yes.
17?
Yes.
To quote from The Prophet by
Okay.
Kahil Gibran. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Probably butchering that. So someone correct me on how to say that if you know this author. And a woman who held a babe against her bosom said, "Speak to us of children." And he said, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons of daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backwards, nor tarries with yesterday."
Next.
Oh, the next page. "You are the boughs from which your children, are
Bows.
living arrows."
You are the
Let me say
bows.
that again.
Yeah.
"You are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with it. And he bends you with his might, that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable." Is that it, or it keeps going?
That's
No,
it. And can we just quickly show the picture?
Sure.
How true is that?
Isn't it?
I think a lot of times as parents, we get in trouble. Can everyone see this? And thank you very much for this wonderful gift, Pauline.
You're welcome.
I think a lot of times as parents, we do lose sight and we overstep our bounds in the sense that they're not ours and we are the bow.
Yep.
And if we could focus being the bow to allow the arrow, like it says to go in the poem, to meet its infinite potential,
Mm-hmm.
then you've been a really good influence in that child's development and life. And being the bow to me, because I ascribe to the fact that I believe our children choose us, that the wisdom you've accumulated, so I tell Julius all the time, when he doesn't want to hear something I'm telling him, I will look at him.
Don't say the "you chose me" thing again.
He will, he said it. I'll say, I know this. I don't need to hear myself tell me this again.
And none of our viewers have heard this either. So you know my pain now if you watch the show on a regular basis.
But Pauline hasn't heard this. You chose me. So suck it up. Just listen to it. And if it resonates, keep it. If it doesn't, I'm good. But at least I was the bow for you to help you move along. And he says it drives him nuts, but it would always calm things down, give us the space, and we would just we'd move forward.
Thank you all for staying with us to the end of tonight's episode. I want to read a couple comments. My mom said the chai recipe is perfected. That's good. Gail says, I'm amazed at your strength. Lisa says, just feeling so tender for this mama and grandmother back when we were talking about that. She has very strong feelings that it wasn't a suicide. Do you feel that it was?
Now, because the financial records and everything else, she spent every dime she had leading right to that, knowing that there'd be nothing left. In the week before she passed, she took her children camping for 5 days. They had tents and everything else and swimming and whatever, and she videotaped all that. It was almost like she knew what she was going to do. So now I'm saying yes.
How does that...
Yeah.
And to answer finally the question from the beginning, how are her sons doing?
They're doing fine. They're doing well.
That's good.
Yep.
Oh,
All 3 children are doing well.
that's great. Pauline, thank you. You're an extraordinary person, extraordinary woman. Your perseverance and deep love is an inspiration to all of us.
Thank you.
So thank you. And
Thank you for coming on our show.
Thank you for coming on.
As my sister Sue would say, you're just one tough broad.
We should end it there. We should
I'll take it. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I wanna see